Bud Not Buddy by Christopher Paul Curtis. Chapter 1. Here we go again. We were all standing in line waiting for breakfast when one of the caseworkers came in and tap, tap, tapped down the line. Uh-oh. This meant bad news. Either they'd found a foster home for somebody, or somebody was about to get paddled. All the kids watched the woman as she moved along the line, her high-heel shoes sounding like little firecrackers going off on the wooden floor. Shoot. She stopped at me and said, "Are you Buddy Caldwell?" I said, "It's Bud, not Buddy, ma'am." She put her hand on my shoulder and took me out of line. Then she pulled Jerry, one of the littler boys, over. "Aren't you Jerry Clark?" He nodded. "Boys, good news. Now that the school year has ended, you both have been accepted in new temporary care homes starting this afternoon." Jerry asked the same thing I was thinking. "Together?" She said, "Why, no. Jerry, you'll be in a family with 3 little girls." Jerry looked like he had just found out they were going to dip him in a pot of boiling milk. "And Bud?" She looked at some papers she was holding. Oh, yes, the Amoses. You'll be with Mr. and Mrs. Amos and their son, who's 12 years old. That makes him just 2 years older than you, doesn't it, Bud?" "Yes, ma'am." She said, "I'm sure you'll both be very happy." Me and Jerry looked at each other. The woman said, Now, boys, no need to look so glum. I know you don't understand what it means, but there's a depression going on all over this country. People can't find jobs, and these are very, very difficult times for everybody. We've been lucky enough to find 2 wonderful families who've opened their doors for you. I think it's best that we show our new foster families that we're very..." She dragged out the word very, waiting for us to finish her sentence for her. Jerry said, "Cheerful, helpful, and grateful." I moved my lips and mumbled. She smiled and said, "Unfortunately, you won't have time for breakfast. I'll have a couple of pieces of fruit put in a bag. In the meantime, go to the sleep room and strip your beds and gather all of your things." Here we go again. I felt like I was walking in my sleep as I followed Jerry back to the room where all the boys' beds were jam-jammed together. This was the 3rd foster home I was going to, and I'm used to packing up and leaving, but it still surprises me that there are always a few seconds right after they tell you you've got to go when my nose gets all runny and my throat gets all choky and my eyes get all stingy. But the tears coming out doesn't happen to me anymore. I don't know when it first happened, but it seems like my eyes don't cry no more. Jerry sat on his bed, and I could tell that he was losing the fight not to cry. Tears were popping out of his eyes and slipping down his cheeks. I sat down next to him and said, "I know being in a house with 3 girls sounds terrible, Jerry, but it's a lot better than being with a boy who's a couple years older than you. I'm the one who's going to have the problems. An older boy is going to want to fight. But those little girls are going to treat you real good. They're going to treat you like some kind of special pet or something." Jerry said, "You really think so?" I said, "I'd trade you in a minute. The worst thing that's going to happen to you is they're going to make you play house a lot. They'll probably make you be the baby, and we'll hug you and do this kind of junk to you." I tickled Jerry under his chin and said, "Gaga, goo goo, baby, baby." Jerry couldn't help but smile. I said, "You're going to be great." Jerry looked like he wasn't so scared anymore, so I went over to my bed and started getting ready. Even though it was me who was in a lot of trouble, I couldn't help but feel sorry for Jerry. Not only because he was going to have to live around 3 girls, but also because being 6 is a real tough age to be at. Most folks think you start to be a real adult when you're 15 or 16 years old, but that's not true. It really starts when you're around 6. It's at 6 that grown folks don't think you're a cute little kid anymore. They talk to you and expect that you understand everything they mean. And you'd best understand too, if you aren't looking for some real trouble. Because it's around 6 that grown folks stop giving you little swats and taps and jump clean up to giving you slugs that'll knock you right down and have you seeing stars in the middle of the day. The first foster home I was in taught me that real quick. 6 is a bad time too, because that's when some real scary things start to happen to your body. It's around then that your teeth start coming loose in your mouth. You wake up one morning and it seems like your tongue is the first one to notice that something strange is going on. Because as soon as you get up there, it's pushing and rubbing up against one of your front teeth, and I'll be doggone if that tooth isn't just the littlest bit wiggly. At first you think it's kind of funny, but the tooth keeps getting looser and looser, and one day, in the middle of pushing the tooth back and forth and squinching your eyes shut, you pull it clean out. It's the scariest thing you can think of because you lose control of your tongue at the same time, and no matter how hard you try to stop it, it won't leave the new hole in your mouth alone. It keeps digging around in the spot where that tooth used to be. You tell some adult about what's happening, but all they do is say it's normal. Can't be too sure though, because it shakes you up a whole lot more than grown folks think it does when perfectly good parts of your body commence to loosening up and falling off of you. Unless you're as stupid as a lamppost, you've got to wonder what's coming off next. Your arm, your leg, your neck. Every morning when you wake up, it seems a lot of your parts aren't stuck on as good as they used to be. 6 is real tough. That's how old I was when I came to live here in the home. That's how old I was when Mama died. I folded the blanket and sheet and set them back on the mattress. Then I reached under the bed to get my suitcase. Most of the kids in the home keep their things in a paper or cloth sack, but not me. I have my own suitcase. I set it on the mattress and untied the twine that held it together. I did what I do every night before I go to sleep. I checked to make sure everything was there. The way there are more and more kids coming into the home every day, I had to make sure no one had run off with any of my things. First, I pulled my blanket out and saw that everything was where it was supposed to be. At the bottom of my suitcase were the flyers. I took the blue flyer out and looked at it again. The paper was starting to wear out for me looking at it so much, but I liked checking to see if there was anything I hadn't noticed before. It was like something was telling me that there was a message for me on this flyer, but I didn't have the decoder ring to read what it was. Across the top of the flyer, written in big black letters, were the words limited engagement. Then in little letters, it said, direct from an SRO engagement in New York City. Underneath that, in big letters again, it said Herman E. Calloway and the Dusky Devastators of the Depression. Those 6 exclamation points made it seem like this was the most important news anyone could think of. Seems like you'd have to be really great to deserve all of those exclamation points all stacked up in a row like that. Next, the paper said, Masters of the New Jazz. Then in the middle of the flyer was a blurry picture of the man I have a real good suspicion about. I've never met him, but I have a pretty good feeling that this guy must be my father. In the picture, he's standing next to a giant fiddle that's taller than him. It looks like it's real heavy because he's leaning up against it, trying to hold it up. He looks like he's been doing this for a long time, and he must be tired because he has a droopy, dreamy look on his face. There are 2 men beside him, one playing drums and the other one blowing a horn. It wasn't hard to see what the guy, who must be my father, was like just by looking at his picture. You could tell he was real quiet, real friendly, and a smart man. He had one of those kind of faces. Underneath the picture, someone had writ with a black fountain pen, one night only in Flint, Michigan, at the luxurious 50 grand on Saturday, June 16th, 1932. 9 until... I remember Mama bringing this flyer with her when she came home from working one day. I remember because she got very upset when she put it on the supper table and kept looking at it and picking it up and putting it back and moving it around. I was only 6 then and couldn't understand why this one got her so upset. She kept 4 others that were a lot like it in her dressing table, but this one really got her jumpy. The only difference I could see between the blue one and the others was that the others didn't say anything about Flint on them. I remember this blue one too because it wasn't too long after she brought it home that I knocked on Mama's door and found her. I put the blue flyer back in the suitcase with the 4 older ones and put everything back in its place. I went over to the big chest of drawers and took my other set of clothes out and put them in the suitcase too. I tied the twine back on my bag and then went and sat on Jerry's bed with him. Jerry must have been thinking just as hard as I was because neither one of us said nothing. We just sat close enough so that our shoulders were touching. Here we go again. Chapter 2. There comes a time when you're losing a fight that it just doesn't make sense to keep on fighting. It's not that you're being a quitter, it's just that you've got the sense to know when enough is enough. I was having this thought because Todd Amos was hitting me so hard and fast that I knew that the blood squirting out of my nose was only the beginning of a whole long list of bad things that were about to happen to me. Todd's next punch crashed into the side of my ear, and I fell on the floor and pulled my knees up to my chest and crossed my arms in front of my head, like a turtle in a shell. I started scooching around toward the bed, hoping I could get under it. Todd started kicking me, but his slippers couldn't hurt me near as much as his fists had. The bedroom door opened, and his mother, Mrs. Amos, came in. It seemed like she was having a hard time figuring out what was going on because Todd's right leg got tired from kicking me, and he switched over to his left one while she watched. Finally, Mrs. Amos said, kind of soft, "Toddy?" Todd looked up, fell on his knees, and put his hands on his throat. He started huffing and puffing with his eyes bucking out of his head and his chest going up and down so hard that it looked like some kind of big animal was inside of him trying to bust out. This was my chance to get under the bed and pull the covers down so they couldn't see me. Mrs. Amos ran over to her son and fell on her knees. She put her arms around his shoulders. "Toddy, Toddy boy, are you all right?" She looked over to where I was, peeking from under the bed. "You little cur, what have you done to Toddy?" Todd coughed out, "Oh, Mother." He took in 2 jumbo breaths. "I was only trying to help." He was sounding like a horse that had been run too hard in the winter, and look where it's gotten me. Todd pointed at his jaw. Mrs. Amos and me could see a perfect print in the shape of my hand welted up on Todd's blubbery cheek. With one quick snatch, she had me from under the bed and out on the floor and laying down next to Todd. "How dare you? This is how you choose to repay me? Not only have you struck him, you have provoked his asthma?" Todd said. "I just tried to waken him to make sure he'd gone to the lavatory, Mother. I was just trying to help." He aimed his finger dead at me and said, "And look at him, Mother, this one's got bedwetter written all over him." I'm not bragging when I say that I'm one of the best liars in the world, but I gotta tell you, Todd was pretty doggone good. It seemed like he knew some of the same things I know, the things I think of all the time and try to remember so I don't make the same mistake more than 7 or 8 times. Shucks, I've gotten so many of them rememorized that I had to give them numbers, and it seemed like Todd knew number 3 of Bud Caldwell's rules and things for having a funner life and making a better liar out of yourself. Rules and things number 3: if you gotta tell a lie, make sure it's simple and easy to remember. Todd had done that, but this wasn't really a good test because Mrs. Amos had her ears set to believe anything Todd said. In her eyes, Todd's mouth was a prayer book. But I can't blame Todd for lying like that. Having someone who likes you so much that they think everything you say is the truth has got to be a liar's paradise. That might feel so good that it make you want to quit lying. But maybe not, because Todd hadn't quit lying since the second I came to this house. What had really happened was that when I woke up from a good sleep, because it felt like a steam locomotive had jumped the tracks and chugged its way straight into my nose. When I jerked up in bed and opened my eyes, Todd was standing next to me with a yellow pencil in his hand. He was looking at it like it was a thermometer and said, "Wow, you got all the way up to R." He turned the pencil toward me, crunched up against the headboard. I saw Ticonderoga printed on the yellow wood. The whole room smelled like the rubber from the eraser, and I was winking and blinking my left eye because it felt like something had poked the back of my eyeball. Todd laughed. "I've never gotten as deep as the N on any of you other little street urchins. I just might enjoy your stay here. Who knows what other things you could be number 1 in, buddy." I already told him twice that my name was Bud, not Buddy. I didn't care that Todd Amos was 12 years old. I didn't care that he was just twice as big as me. And I didn't care that his mother was being paid to take care of me. I wasn't about to let anybody call me Buddy and stick a pencil up my nose all the way to the R. I swung as hard as I could at Todd's big balloon head. Somewhere between the time I threw my punch and the time it landed, my fist came open, and when my hand landed, it made a pop like a .22 rifle going off. Todd fell on the floor like he'd been cold-cocked. He sputtered and muttered and felt the spot where I slapped him. Then a big smile came on his face, and he stood up and started walking real slow toward me where I was on the bed. He untied his robe and dropped it on the floor like he was getting ready to do some hard work. I jumped to the floor and got my fists up. Todd might have been a lot bigger than me, but he'd better be ready. This wasn't going to be a bird's nest sitting on the ground for him. He could kiss my wrist if he thought I was going to let him whip me up without a good fight. Being this brave was kind of stupid. Even though Todd was a puffy, rich old mama's boy who wore a robe and slippers, he could hit like a mule. And it wasn't too long before I decided enough was enough. But the story that Mrs. Amos was hearing from her lying son was only that Todd had tried to wake me up so I could go to the bathroom. Mrs. Amos hated bedwetters more than anything in the world, and my bed had a sticky, hot, smelly rubber baby sheet on it. She'd said it wasn't anything personal, and after I'd proved myself for 2 or 3 months, I could get a proper cloth sheet. But until then, she had to protect her mattress. She pulled Todd to his feet and led him to the door. She looked over at me. You are a beastly little brute, and I will not tolerate even one night with you under my roof. Who knows what you would be capable of while we slept? The door shut behind them, and I heard a key jiggle in the lock. I plugged the right side of my nose and tried real hard to blow the smell of rubber out of the left side. The key jiggled in the lock again. This time, when the door opened, Mr. Amos was standing with Mrs. Amos. He was carrying my suitcase. Uh-oh. They'd looked inside. I could tell because the twine that held it together was tied in a kind of knot that I didn't know. This was wrong. They'd promised they'd keep it safe and not look in it. They laughed at me when I made them promise. But they did promise. Boy, Mrs. Amos said, I am not the least bit surprised at your show of ingratitude. Lord knows I've been stung by my own people before. But take a good look at me, because I am one person who is totally fed up with you and your ilk. I do not have time to put up with the foolishness of those members of our race who do not want to be uplifted. In the morning, I'll be getting in touch with the home, and as much as a bad penny, you shall be returning to them. I'm a woman of my word, though, and you shall not spend one night in my house. She looked at her husband. Mr. Amos will show you to the shed tonight. You can come back in tomorrow for breakfast before you go. I do hope your conscience plagues you, because you know you may have ruined things for many others. I do not know if I shall ever be able to help another child in need. I do know I shall not allow vermin to attack my poor baby in his own house. She talked like this, and she wasn't even a preacher or a teacher. Shucks, she talked strange like this, and she wasn't even a librarian. I only halfway listened to what Mrs. Amos was saying. I was too busy keeping my eye on my suitcase, wondering if they'd stolen anything from it, and thinking about getting even. When I thought that she was done talking, I reached my hand out for my suitcase, but she told Mr. Amos, Oh no, we shall hold on to his beloved valuables. She laughed. This shall be our assurance that nothing comes up missing from the house, and that this little animal is still here in the morning. He is far too attached to those treasures to go anywhere without them. Mrs. Amos was one of those grown-ups who could always think of one more thing to say. And that is not all. Before you retire to the shed, you shall go to Todd and apologize, or I shall be forced to give you the strapping of your life. I'd been so worried about my suitcase that I didn't even notice the thick black razor strap hanging out of Mrs. Amos's hand. She didn't have to worry. I'd apologize. One beating from these Amoses was enough for me. She grabbed my arm. Mr. Amos walked out of the room with my suitcase, and Mrs. Amos pulled me down the hall to Todd's room. We stood outside the door listening to Todd groan. When Mr. Amos came back, my suitcase was gone. He'd been so quick that I knew my bag couldn't be too far away. She tapped on Todd's door and said, Toddy, may we come in? Todd's groans got a lot louder. Finally, he said, Yes, Mother. Come in. We opened the door, and as soon as he saw me, Todd got a real terrified look on his face. He scooched up to the headboard and wrapped his arms around his head. Mrs. Amos gave me a shake and said, Well? I put my head down and started shooting apologies out like John Dillinger shoots out bullets. I aimed at Todd first. I know it was wrong of me to hit you. I know you were only trying to help, and I'm very sorry for what I did." I looked at Mr. Amos, and sir, I'm sorry that I got you out of your sleep. He rolled his eyes like that was enough for him. Mrs. Amos was going to be the hardest because just like her ears were set to believe everything that came out of Todd's lips, they were set to not believe anything I said. And if I didn't lie good enough, she was going to use that strap on me. These Amoses might look like a bunch of cream puffs, but if she was anything like Todd, I bet she could really pack a wallop. And Mrs. Amos, I'm so grateful for all of your help, and I'm really, really sorry. I looked up and could see she needed more. If you give me another chance, I promise I'll do a whole lot better. Please don't call the home. Please don't send me back. Shucks. Going back to the home was just what I wanted to do, but I was being just like Brer Rabbit in one of the books Mama used to read to me at night when he yelled out, "Please, Brer Fox, don't throw me into the pricker patch. Please, please." This was another one of Bud Caldwell's rules and things to have a funner life and make a better liar of yourself. Rules and things number 118. You have to give adults something that they think they can use to hurt you by taking it away. That way, they might not take something away that you really do want. Unless they're crazy or real stupid, they won't take everything because if they did that, they wouldn't have anything to hold over your head to hurt you with later. I stopped talking and gave Mrs. Amos a chance to jump right in. She held her hand up in my face and said, "Enough! Mr. Amos, give him the blanket and pillow off the bed he was in and put him in the shed." Todd said, "Yeah, buddy, keep a sharp eye out for the vampire bats in the shed." It was like a miracle. Todd's asthma was gone, and he turned into a real chatterbox. "Oh, and watch out for those spiders and centipedes, buddy. The last kid who got put in there got stung so bad, he was swole up as big as a whale when we got him out in the morning." I guess I didn't look scared enough because Todd kept going. "The kid before that hasn't been found to this day. All that's left is that big puddle of his blood on the floor. Isn't that right, Mother?" Mrs. Amos said, "No, Toddy, hush up. You'll just tire yourself out more." I noticed that she never denied the things Todd had said about the vampires and centipedes and spiders and puddles of blood. As I followed Mr. Amos, I kept a sharp eye out for my suitcase. When we got to the kitchen, the first thing I saw was that there was a double-barreled shotgun leaning against the side of the icebox. I didn't have time to wonder why they'd be so scared they'd keep a big gun like that out in the open, because I spotted my suitcase slid way under the kitchen table. I didn't let Mr. Amos know I'd seen it, but it did make me get a lot calmer. We went out of the back kitchen door and down the steps into the dark. We walked around to the back of the shed, and he put a key in the padlock. A chain rattled, the lock came off, and the door creaked open. Even though it was nighttime, there was a whole different, scarier kind of dark in the shed, a colder dark with more grays and more shadows. An old smell leaked out, and it seemed like it was a perfect smell that all this gray would have. Mr. Amos nudged me, and I took a baby step into the shed. He could kiss my wrist if he thought I was going to beg him and say things like, "I'll do anything you folks ask me if you don't lock me up in here all alone." I squeezed my tongue between my teeth to hold it still, because I know a lot of times your brain might want to be brave, but your mouth might let some real chicken sounding stuff falling out of it. I stood a little bit inside and looked around. Right under the window was a pile of stacked wood. There were a bunch of dusty spider webs in front of the little window, and someone had pasted old yellow newspapers over the glass so the kids who got locked in here couldn't peek out. Mr. Amos handed me the blanket and pillow and gave me another nudge. I took 2 more baby steps in. I looked down at the floor. If I was like a normal kid, I would have busted out crying, but I just stood there breathing hard. It was a good thing I'd bit my tongue because I came real close to saying those stupid begging words to Mr. Amos. Right in the middle of the floor, there was a big black stain in the dirt. They were really going to make me sleep in a shed with a patch of blood from that kid who disappeared out of here a couple weeks ago. The floor went completely black when Mr. Amos pulled the door shut. I couldn't see it now, but I'd rememorized the exact shape the stain was in. The padlock snapped shut with the loudest click I've ever heard. Chapter 3. The only thing I could hear was my own breath. It was so loud that it sounded like there were 6 scared people locked up in a shed. I closed my eyes and thought real hard about making my breathing slow down. Pretty soon it sounded like the 5 other breathers in the shed had left. I was still scared, but now it was that get real excited and want to move around kind of scared. Didn't take too long for my eyes to get used to the dark. There was a gray gas in one corner, next to a bunch of gray rakes and a pile of gray rags, and a gray tire next to some gray fishing poles. Maybe Mr. Amos had only pretended to lock the door. I reached my hand toward the gray doorknob, and quick as that, I went from the kind of calm to being in that stand in one place with spit drooling down the front of your shirt kind of scared. Halfway up the door were 3 little flat monster heads guarding the doorknob. Each head had 2 little round eyes staring right at me. The eyes were the only thing in the shed that weren't gray. They were a bright yellow and a big black spot right in the middle. I dropped my blanket and pillow and backstepped until my legs hit the woodpile behind me. From all the fast breathing going on, you'd have thought the 5 other scared people had come back and brought a couple of scared friends with them. Each head had a wide open mouth with a sharp set of pointy teeth and lips smiling back, ready to bite. It felt like the shed was getting smaller and smaller, and the little mouths were getting closer and closer. Then I knew what I was looking at. The doorknob guards were 3 dried-out fish heads that someone had nailed to the door. I ran over to the pile of rags and poked at one of them with my shoe to make sure there weren't any rats or centipedes hiding under it. Then I picked it up and hung it over the fish heads so I couldn't see them and they couldn't see me. I picked up my blanket and pillow and had to decide what was the best way to sleep. I knew the floor was no good. I had to bet all sort of bugs and roaches were crawling all around. I remember what happened to my best friend Bugs when a cockroach crawled in his ear one night at home. 4 grown folks had held Bugs down whilst they tried to pull it out with a pair of tweezers, but the only thing that did was pull the roach's back legs off. When they were digging around in Bugs's ears with the tweezers, you'd have thought they were pulling his legs off, not some cockroaches. I'd never heard a kid scream that loud. After about 15 minutes of Bugs screaming the joint down, they said they were going to have to take him to the emergency room to get the roach out. It was almost morning when Bugs got back. Everyone was asleep except me. I waited until they put him in bed and turned off the lights. I said, "Did they get it out?" He said, "Oh, hi, Bud. Yeah, they got him." "Did it hurt a lot?" "Nope." "Were you scared?" "Nope." "Then how come you were screaming so doggone loud?" He said, "I didn't know I was. I probably couldn't hear me screaming 'cause that roach was so loud." I'd seen lots of roaches, but I'd never heard one of them make any sound, I said. "Loud how?" "Well, Bugs ain't so different from us as you'd think. Soon as he saw those tweezers coming at him, he was pretty terrified and commenced to screaming in English, too, not some bug language like you'd expect from a roach." "Yeah? What'd he say?" "All he kept saying was, 'My legs, my legs! What have they done to my legs?'" And that's the true story about how Bugs started getting called Bugs. I'd bet $1,000 that there were roaches on the floor of the shed just waiting to crawl in someone's ear, and I'd bet those Amoses wouldn't even try to pull the roach out. And who knows how long I'd have to listen to some terrified roach screaming his head off right up against my eardrum. I spread the blanket on top of the woodpile and climbed up on it. This put me so I was even with the window. I took a piece of bark and brushed all the spider webs from in front of the window. Then I put my hand on the glass to see if the newspaper was pasted from the inside or the outside. I touched paper. I spread my fingers and my hand looked like a yellow jacket bumblebee, bright yellow with black stripes. This was a great place to have shadow puppets, so I made my hand be a wolf and a dog and a duck. After a while, that got to be pretty boring, so I scraped at the paper with my fingernails so I could see outside. But I like to keep my nails bit down real low, and the paper didn't budge. I took out my jackknife and tried scraping the newspaper with it. The paper peeled away in curly little yellow stripes, like that stuff rich people throw on New Year's Eve. I finally got a hole big enough to look out and mashed my eye up against the glass. I could see the back of the Amos house real clear. Their light was on. That had to be Mr. and Mrs. Amos's bedroom. The little bit of light that came through the hole in the paper made me get calm enough that I could lay my head on my pillow and take a nap. When I blinked my eyes open, the first thing I noticed was that the light from the Amos's bedroom was out. The next thing I noticed made me wish I'd stay asleep. Up at the very top of the shed was the biggest vampire bat you'd ever see. He was hanging upside down asleep, but the smell of me rising up to him would probably wake him up at any minute. I reached over to the window and tried to slide it open. It budged an inch. I rolled off the woodpile, crawled toward the door with the fish head guards. I reached my hand up the doorknob and turned. Mr. Amos was trying to help me, but after the door opened a crack, the padlock and chain on the outside held it right. I looked back up into the rafters to see if the bat had woke up. He was still sound asleep. Just like there's a time that a smart person knows enough is enough, there's a time you know you've got to fight. I wasn't about to let this vampire suck my blood dry without a war. He could kiss my wrist if he thought he was going to do that. I got up off my knees and picked up the gray rake. I walked over to the woodpile, cool as a cucumber, but inside, every part of my guts was shaking. I stood up on the woodpile and held the rake like it was a Louisville slugger. I eyed where the bat was sleeping and revved the rake like I was going to hit a 400-foot home run. Just before I swung, I remembered another one of Bud Caldwell's rules and things for having a funner life and making a better liar out of yourself. Rules and things number 328. When you make up your mind to do something, hurry up and do it. If you wait, you might talk yourself out of what you wanted in the first place. Shucks, I couldn't remember for sure if you killed the vampire by driving a stake in its heart or by shooting it with a silver bullet. If I was wrong and didn't kill the bat right away, I was going to be trapped in the shed with a vampire who was probably going to be real upset that someone had woke him up by whacking him with a rake. I took my jackknife out of my pocket and pulled the blade open. That way, if I didn't kill him with the rake, and it came down to the two of us tussling on the floor, maybe a silver blade in his heart would be just as good as a silver bullet. Unless that was what you had to do with werewolves. I raised the rake over my head again, closed my eyes, and swung it like I was Paul Bunyan chopping down a tree with one blow. I felt the rake jerk a little when it hit the bat, and I opened my eyes just in time to see the vampire get cut right in half. I was kind of surprised it didn't scream or cry or say, "Curses, you got me!" Instead, the only sound I heard was a kind of rattling, like a couple of pieces of paper rubbing together, or like dry leaves blowing around in the wind. The next sound I heard was even worse than if the vampire had said, "Aha, you doggone kid, that hurt, but now I get my revenge." It sounded like I'd turn on a buzzsaw in the shed. All of a sudden, it felt like someone had stuck a red-hot nail right into my left cheek. My hand reached up to grab my cheek, and I felt something creepy and prickly there. I brought my hand back down, and it was holding the biggest, maddest hornet I'd ever seen. I squeezed my hand shut to crush it, but I got in another sting on my palm. What I thought was a vampire bat hanging on the ceiling was really a hornet's nest, and now there were about 6,000 hornets flying around in the tiny shed, and each and every one of them was looking for me. Another fire nail went into my knee, and a second one went into my sock. Maybe this was why the other kid that they'd found in here had been as big as a whale. He was swole up from all the hornet stings. I dropped my shoulder down and charged at the door with all my might. The door banged against a lock, but it didn't budge an inch. All that happened was a rag I'd covered the fish heads with came off, and I got bounced back and landed square on the floor. I jumped up again. This time, when I charged at the door, I put my hand out like Paul Robeson, running down the football field. This wasn't a real good idea. I forgot all about the fish head door guards. My fingers went right into the mouth of the biggest one, and his little needle teeth cut me like a razor. I pulled my hand back and screamed. Another hornet buzzed into my ear, and it felt like someone had poured hot wax right down into my brain. The only thing I could think to do was jump on a woodpile and bust the glass out of the window. I grabbed the handles of the window and gave them one more jerk. I guess being scared gives you a lot of strength because this time the window flew open with a loud bang. 3 hornets found me at the same time, and all 4 of us fell out of the window. As soon as we hit the ground, I rolled as far away from the shed as I could go. I smacked and whacked the hornets that had taken a ride on me and just laid there until I could catch my breath. After a while, the stings and the fish guard bite quit hurting so much. I started getting madder and madder. I was mad at those Amoses, but most of all, I was mad at me for believing there was really a vampire in the shed and for getting trapped like this where there wasn't anybody who cared what happened to me. I simmered down and started thinking about getting even. I wondered how hard I'd have to pull the trigger on that double barrel shotgun for it to go off. I sneaked up the back porch steps to get inside the house. Maybe the vampire bat didn't say it, but the only thought on my mind was, aha, you doggone Amoses, that hurt. But now I get my revenge.